My name is Daniel Reed, and up until 2 months ago, I thought my life was normal, average, maybe even pretty good. My wife, Lindsay, and I had been married for 8 years. We had a cozy house in the suburbs, 2 dogs named Max and Ruby, and shared everything, or so I thought. I met Lindsay during our senior year in college. She was everything I wasn't: wild, spontaneous, and dangerously charming. I was hooked from the moment we met, but somewhere along the way, that charm of hers took on a darker edge. It wasn't something I noticed right away. For the first few years, things were good. But somewhere around year 6, the cracks started to show. Lindsay became restless. She started coming home later and later from work, claiming deadlines or office drama. At first, I believed her. After all, her job at the PR firm was demanding. But after a while, I couldn't ignore the weirdness. The late-night texts, the weekend trips for work, and the way she rolled her eyes whenever I asked if something was wrong. One day, while waiting for her at dinner, she showed up almost 2 hours late, smelling like expensive cologne that wasn't mine. I remember staring at her across the table, her laughter too forced, her stories too rehearsed. My gut twisted, but I ignored it. "You're being paranoid," I told myself. That's when I noticed her phone buzz. She turned it face down. I didn't think much of it until later that night when she was in the shower. Something in me clicked, a need to find answers no matter how ugly. I opened her laptop on a whim and saw that our Apple accounts were still linked. I'd forgotten about it until that moment. We'd used the Find My iPhone app to track each other when one of us lost our phone or when she would forget hers at the gym. As I stared at the app, curiosity pulled me under like a riptide. I clicked locate. Her current location wasn't our house or her office. It was at some random apartment across town. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a detour or a late meeting. This was something else entirely. I stared at the screen, heart racing, 1,000 thoughts running through my head. I convinced myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe a client's emergency? Maybe a friend needed her? But deep down, I already knew. Couldn't breathe. I stared at the blinking on the map, Lindsay's phone, sitting still at some random apartment complex across town. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, the world around me blurring. There was no meeting, no emergency, no friend in need. I grabbed my keys, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. Every worst-case scenario flashed through my head as I sped down the highway, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. When I arrived at the apartment building, I parked in the shadows, hoping I wouldn't be seen. I opened the app again. The blinking dot was still there. Apartment 4B. "Don't be stupid," I whispered to myself. This could all be a misunderstanding. But some part of me knew I wasn't wrong. I crept up the stairs, every footstep echoing in the empty hallway. My hands shook as I reached the door to 4B. And that's when I heard it, the muffled laughter of a man and a woman. Lindsay's laugh. The same laugh that used to be just for me. A pit formed in my stomach as I leaned closer. "I told you he's clueless." Lindsay's voice rang through the door, smug and cruel. "He still thinks I'm at work." The man chuckled. "Well, that's his problem. You've got more fun things to do here." I clenched my fists until my nails dug into my palms. Every fiber of my being screamed to kick the door down, to rip that guy apart. But I didn't. Instead, I took out my phone and hit record. The laughter, the flirting. It all became hard evidence. After a few minutes, I couldn't stand it anymore. I turned and walked back to my car, the recording still running. I felt sick. My whole world had cracked wide open, and the truth spilled out like poison. Lindsay wasn't just lying. She was mocking me, treating me like a fool. I sat in the driver's seat, staring blankly ahead. I should have felt rage or heartbreak, but all I felt was hollow. I drove home in silence, the recording playing over and over in my head like a broken record. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I knew there was no turning back. Lindsay thought she could walk all over me and get away with it. She thought I was too blind or too weak to see what was happening. She was wrong. When I walked through the front door, the house was dark and quiet. The dogs ran up to greet me, their tails wagging. For a second, I let myself sink into the comfort of their innocence. They had no idea what was about to happen. About an hour later, the front door opened, and Lindsay strolled in like nothing was wrong. She still had that stupid, "I've got the world fooled" look on her face. "Hey, babe," she said casually as she tossed her purse onto the couch. "Sorry I'm late. Work's been insane." I stared at her, barely able to believe the audacity. "Oh, really? Work? Huh." She froze, sensing the shift in my tone. Her eyes flickered with something. Guilt? Annoyance? Either way, she knew. "What's with the attitude?" she asked, playing innocent. I held up my phone and pressed play. The room filled with the sound of her voice from the recording. "He still thinks I'm at work. He's clueless." Her face went pale. The confidence drained out of her like water from a cracked vase. What the hell is that?" she stammered. I stood up slowly, locking eyes with her. "It's you, Lindsay. It's your voice. And don't even try to deny it." For a second, I thought she might apologize. Maybe she'd cry, beg for forgiveness. But no. She crossed her arms and sneered. "So what if it is?" she spat. "You were never enough for me, Daniel. You've been boring for years. And maybe if you weren't so predictable, I wouldn't have needed someone else." Her words hit me like a slap across the face. The woman I had loved, trusted, and built a life with wasn't just a liar. She was cruel. "I gave you everything," I said, my voice shaking. "And this is how you repay me?" She shrugged. "Life's not a fairy tale, Daniel. Get over it." The rage inside me boiled over, but instead of shouting, I smiled. A cold, bitter smile. "You know what, Lindsay? You're right. Life's not a fairy tale." She raised an eyebrow, confused. I grabbed my laptop from the counter and spun it toward her. On the screen was an email draft, open and ready to send. The recipients, every contact from her office, including her boss and colleagues. Attached was the recording and a note. "Just thought you should know what Lindsay's really doing during late nights at work." Her face twisted in horror. "You wouldn't dare," she screeched, lunging for the laptop. I stepped back. "I already did." Her phone buzzed almost immediately. The fallout had begun. The texts and calls started pouring in from her coworkers, family, and friends. Lindsay grabbed her phone and frantically scrolled, her face contorting with panic. "You ruined me," she screamed. "You've destroyed everything." I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "No, Lindsay. You destroyed everything the moment you betrayed me." She tried to argue, to manipulate, but the damage was done. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The house felt still after Lindsay left, like the calm after an explosion. I stood there for a moment, letting it all settle in. I'd just blown up her lies in front of everyone she knew. And as much as I should have felt triumphant, all I felt was exhausted. My phone lit up with messages, Lindsay's sister, her friends, even her boss. The ones who mattered weren't mad at me. They were disgusted with her. The message was spreading faster than I'd anticipated. One text from her sister stood out. "I'm so sorry, Daniel. I had no idea she was doing this to you." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The truth was out there now, and Lindsay had no one left to fool. I poured myself a drink, sat down on the couch, and let my mind finally drift. The next morning, I woke up to find that Lindsay hadn't come home. I wasn't surprised. Her car was gone, and I didn't care where she went. I opened the Find My iPhone app one last time and saw her phone pinging from some hotel downtown. I closed the app and deleted her device from the account. She was out of my life now, completely. The unexpected twist. Just when I thought I'd heard the last of her, she showed up at the house 2 days later. Her hair was a mess, and her eyes were red from crying. She looked nothing like the Lindsay I knew, the woman who always acted like she was above it all. "Daniel," she said quietly, standing in the doorway. "Can we talk?" I sighed and leaned against the counter. "Talk? Now you want to talk?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I screwed up. I didn't mean for it to get this bad." I almost laughed. "Didn't mean for it to get this bad? You've been lying to me for months. Lindsay, you made me the fool in front of everyone. And now that your world's crumbling, you want sympathy. She broke down, sobbing into her hands. I was scared. I thought I wanted more, but I didn't realize how much I was losing. Her words meant nothing. It wasn't regret. It was panic. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. It's over, Lindsay, I said, my voice calm but firm. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. She looked at me, desperation in her eyes. Please, we can fix this. I shook my head. No, we can't. I deserve better. The turning point. That was the last real conversation we ever had. A week later, I filed for divorce. She tried to make things difficult, but the truth was on my side. The emails, the recording, everything pointed to her betrayal. When it was all finalized, she moved out for good. I thought the end of our marriage would feel like a defeat, but it didn't. Felt like freedom. The day the divorce was finalized, I sat alone in my quiet house. The papers were signed, the last ties to Lindsay severed. There was no dramatic send-off, no parting words. Just a quiet, definitive end to the chaos she brought into my life. I looked around at the empty space and felt something unexpected. Relief. Over the next few weeks, I took small steps toward rebuilding my life. I redecorated the house, changing the things that reminded me of her. New curtains, new pictures, even a new couch. I started hanging out more with friends I hadn't seen in years. I found pieces of myself that I'd forgotten during those years of trying to hold together a crumbling marriage. Lindsay, on the other hand, wasn't doing so well. I'd heard through mutual friends that Ryan ghosted her after the truth came out. She'd burned every bridge in her life, and now she was left to deal with the ashes. There was a strange sense of justice in that. Reflection and moving on. Looking back, I don't regret what I did. Lindsay thought she could use lies and deceit to build a second life behind my back. But lies always crumble in the end. What surprised me the most wasn't her betrayal. It was how strong I became once I stopped making excuses for her. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: you don't owe loyalty to someone who treats your heart like a backup plan. The people who deserve you will never put you in a position where you have to question their love and loyalty. To anyone going through what I did, here's my advice. Trust your instincts. They're there for a reason. And when you discover the truth, don't let it destroy you. Let it free you. I thought losing Lindsay would break me, but I was wrong. Losing her wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. I'm still here. I'm stronger. And I'm finally living life on my terms.